What's happening, Blue Jays Nation? Welcome back to another breakdown here on Jays Central. Before we dive into today's major story, make sure you hit that like button right now because we've got some developing news that could completely reshape Toronto's rotation heading into spring training. And listen, I need you guys commenting down below with your thoughts on this one because the front office might actually be considering something that nobody saw coming. So here's the situation. Reports are circulating that Toronto is showing legitimate interest in left-handed pitcher Framber Valdez, who remains unsigned as we approach pitching and catching reporting dates. Now I know what many of you are thinking already, and trust me, we're going to break down whether this makes any sense whatsoever. But first, let's establish the facts and separate speculation from reality. Multiple credible sources have now connected the Blue Jays to Valdez. This isn't just one random tweet from an unreliable account. We're talking about established baseball insiders reporting that Toronto has had conversations with Valdez's representation. These discussions apparently took place during the winter meetings, which happened before the organization committed major resources to acquiring Dylan Cease. That 7-year, $210 million investment was supposed to be the big splash that solidified the starting rotation for years to come. The timing of these renewed rumors is absolutely fascinating. We're just days away from players reporting to spring facilities in Florida and Arizona. Valdez is still sitting out there on the open market, and suddenly his name keeps getting linked back to Toronto. Now, anyone who follows baseball closely understands how these situations typically work. When you have a high-profile free agent represented by a prominent agent still unsigned this late in the offseason, there's often a strategic element to the information being released to media members. Make sure you're subscribed to Jays Central because we're going to continue tracking this story as it develops over the coming days. Smash that like button if you want Toronto to make another big move before opening day. The engagement from you guys really helps us grow this community and bring you more Blue Jays content every single day. Let's talk about what Valdez actually brings to the table as a pitcher. The 32-year-old left-hander has been one of the more consistent performers in the American League over recent seasons. His sinker ball approach generates an enormous amount of ground balls, which plays particularly well in spacious ballparks. The numbers project him to deliver somewhere between 3 and 4 wins above replacement level for the upcoming season, depending on which statistical model you prefer to trust. That type of production would make him the best available starting pitcher remaining in free agency by a significant margin. When teams are genuinely trying to compete for championships, they typically don't hesitate to add impact talent when it becomes available. The philosophy is pretty straightforward. If you can acquire a player who makes your team measurably better, you find a way to make it happen even if the financial commitment stretches your budget or the contract length extends beyond your comfort zone. Having the player on your roster is almost always preferable to watching him sign elsewhere and potentially facing him in crucial games. Toronto already demonstrated this aggressive approach earlier in the offseason. They didn't wait around or try to get cute with negotiations. Management identified Cease as their top target and moved quickly to secure his services before other contending teams could enter serious discussions. That deal raised some eyebrows around the league because of the total commitment involved, but the Blue Jays clearly decided that anchoring their rotation with someone who has led all of baseball in strikeouts over a multi-year period was worth the investment. Drop a comment right now telling me if you think Ross Atkins should be making another massive financial commitment this late in the winter. Do the Blue Jays need to add another established starter, or should they focus their remaining resources on different areas of the roster? I'm really curious to hear what the Jays Central community thinks about this developing situation. The question that keeps coming up is whether Toronto could realistically pull off a second major rotation addition in the same offseason. We've already seen them commit over $200 million to one pitcher. Could they really turn around and sign another high-priced starter just weeks later? The financial implications would be significant. The luxury tax calculations would become more complicated. The long-term payroll structure would require some creative maneuvering. But if management believes this roster is close to contending for a World Series, maybe conventional budget wisdom goes out the window. Here's where things get interesting from a roster construction standpoint. Toronto already made their big move to upgrade the starting rotation. They've got Cease locked in for 7 seasons. They have other established pitchers under contract who are expected to fill out the rest of the rotation. On the surface, Adding another high-priced veteran starter seems redundant unless something else is happening behind the scenes that we don't know about yet. Baseball insiders understand that late off-season rumors often serve specific purposes. When an unsigned free agent's name suddenly appears in multiple reports linking him to various teams, there's frequently a strategic element involved. Agents need to create market pressure to drive up offers or accelerate negotiations with potential suitors. It's entirely possible that Valdez's representation is using Toronto's name to generate urgency with other clubs that might be hesitating to meet their asking price. Before we continue breaking this down, hit that like button if you're enjoying the analysis. We put tons of work into researching these stories and bringing you detailed breakdowns that go beyond the surface level takes you see everywhere else. Your support through likes, comments, and subscriptions allows us to keep delivering this content consistently. The fact that two separate reporters with strong reputations have now connected Toronto to Valdez does carry some weight. When multiple independent sources arrive at similar conclusions, it usually indicates there's at least some substance behind the speculation. The Blue Jays did meet with Valdez's representatives according to these reports. Those conversations happened at the winter meetings, which is a standard venue for teams to explore potential fits with free agents and their agents. What makes this situation particularly intriguing is that those meetings occurred before Toronto ultimately decided to go all in on Cease. This suggests that management was evaluating multiple options for upgrading their pitching staff. They were doing their due diligence on different available starters, weighing the pros and cons of various potential additions. Valdez was apparently on their radar as someone worth investigating, even if they ultimately went in a different direction initially. So the real question becomes whether anything has changed since those initial discussions. Has Valdez's market developed differently than his camp expected? Are there potential trade scenarios being discussed that would create an unexpected rotation opening for Toronto? Could the Blue Jays be considering a more aggressive roster configuration than anyone anticipated? Comment below with your theories because this situation has several possible explanations. Welcome back to Jays Central for the second part of our deep dive into the Framber Valdez rumors. If you're just joining us, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our Blue Jays coverage. We're breaking down whether Toronto actually makes sense as a landing spot for the best pitcher still available in free agency. Let's start by examining what Valdez would bring to any rotation he joins. His style of pitching is built around generating weak contact and getting hitters to pound the ball into the ground. That sinker ball approach has been incredibly effective throughout his career, producing ground ball rates that consistently rank among the best in baseball. When you can get opposing batters to hit the ball on the ground at elite rates, you put tremendous pressure on defenses while limiting the types of dangerous contact that lead to extra base hits and home runs. The statistical projections for Valdez's upcoming season vary slightly, depending on which model you consult, but they all cluster around similar conclusions. Most systems forecast him to produce between 3 and 4 wins above replacement level, which would represent strong front-of-the-rotation performance. That level of production is exactly what contending teams desperately need, especially in a league where quality starting pitching remains incredibly difficult to find. Smash that like button right now if you think Valdez would be an upgrade for Toronto's rotation. Your engagement really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more in-depth Blue Jays analysis every single week. Under normal circumstances, any organization with legitimate championship aspirations would aggressively pursue a pitcher projected to deliver 3+ wins above replacement. That type of addition can completely transform a rotation, providing innings, reliability, and performance that ripples through your entire pitching staff. When you add a horse who can give you 200 quality innings, it reduces stress on your bullpen, gives your offense more opportunities to win games, and creates a psychological edge that impacts team morale. But here's where the Toronto situation becomes complicated. The Blue Jays already made their massive rotation investment by signing Cease to that 7-year deal. They committed major long-term resources to landing a pitcher who led baseball in strikeouts over an extended period. That was supposed to be the move that solved their rotation questions and gave them an ace to anchor their staff for years to come. Adding another high-priced veteran starter on top of that seems excessive unless you're planning something dramatic with your existing roster. Let's think through the current rotation situation. Toronto has Cease locked in as their #1 starter. They have other pitchers under contract who were expected to fill out the rest of the rotation in various roles. The depth chart appeared relatively settled after the Cease signing. So where exactly would Valdez fit into this puzzle? Is management considering moving someone else out of the rotation? Could there be trades in the works that haven't been reported yet? Or is this rumor completely overblown and based on preliminary conversations that never led anywhere meaningful? Drop a comment telling me how you think Valdez would slot into Toronto's rotation if he actually signed. Who gets bumped from the starting five? How does the depth chart shake out? I want to hear your thoughts on how this roster would be configured. The timing of these renewed rumors is suspicious enough to warrant skepticism. We're now just over a week away from pitchers and catchers officially reporting to spring training facilities. Most of the significant free agent signings happen much earlier in the offseason. By this point in February, the market has usually settled considerably. The fact that Valdez remains unsigned this late suggests that something about his situation isn't aligning with team expectations around the league. This is where understanding baseball's business dynamics becomes important. Valdez is represented by one of the most prominent agents in the sport, someone known for driving hard bargains and maximizing value for his clients. That representation style sometimes leads to extended negotiations that push deep into the offseason. The strategy often involves waiting for teams to become desperate as spring training approaches, hoping that urgency will drive up offers. But it's also a calculated risk, because waiting too long can cause teams to commit their resources elsewhere. Before we go further, hit that like button if you appreciate the detailed breakdowns we provide here on Jays Central. We don't just read you the headlines. We dig into the context, analyze the business angles, and help you understand what's really happening with your Blue Jays. When a high-profile unsigned free agent's name starts appearing in multiple reports linking him to various teams, experienced baseball observers recognize the pattern. This often indicates that the player's camp is trying to generate market activity through strategic media placement. By getting their client's name connected to teams that might be plausible fits, they create the perception of competition and urgency. Other teams who might have interests start wondering if they're about to miss out. It's a common tactic in late off-season negotiations. That doesn't necessarily mean there's zero substance to the Toronto connection. The reported meeting between Blue Jays management and Valdez's representatives at the winter meetings apparently did happen. Those conversations were real, even if they ultimately didn't lead to anything at that time. But the fact that this information is surfacing now, weeks after those meetings and after Toronto already signed Cease, raises legitimate questions about motivation and timing. Let's consider the financial implications if Toronto actually pursued this signing. They've already committed substantial payroll to Cease contract. Adding another expensive pitcher would push their total spending into territory that might trigger luxury tax penalties or create payroll inflexibility in future seasons. Management would need to carefully evaluate whether the on-field benefits justify the financial consequences. For a market like Toronto, those calculations become especially complex when you factor in currency exchange rates and the challenges of Canadian teams operating in a predominantly American league. Comment below and tell me whether you think ownership would approve another massive financial commitment this late in the offseason. Do the Blue Jays have the resources to stack their rotation with high-priced talent, or should they be more conservative with their remaining budget flexibility? The competitive landscape in the American League East makes roster decisions even more critical. Toronto faces incredibly strong division rivals who have also been aggressive in upgrading their teams. Every win matters enormously when you're trying to secure playoff positioning in such a challenging division. If adding Valdez represents the difference between making the playoffs and missing out, that calculation changes dramatically even if the fit seems redundant on paper. Welcome to the final block of our Framber Valdez coverage here on Jays Central. Before we wrap up, I need you to do two things. First, hit that like button because it genuinely helps our channel reach more Blue Jays fans. Second, drop a comment telling me whether you want Toronto to sign Valdez or pass on this opportunity. The community engagement on these videos has been incredible, and your opinions matter. So where do we go from here? Spring training is rapidly approaching, which creates natural deadlines that could force resolution to Valdez's free agency. Players want to be settled with their new teams before reporting dates arrive. Organizations prefer to have their rosters finalized so coaches can plan properly for camp. The next week or two should bring clarity one way or another about where Valdez ultimately lands. If Toronto is genuinely interested, they'll need to move quickly. Other teams who still have rotation needs might suddenly become more aggressive if they sense Valdez is willing to sign at a reduced price point. The Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles, and other contenders could potentially jump into negotiations if the contract demands become more reasonable. Toronto would face competition from multiple fronts if they decide to seriously pursue this addition. Make sure you're subscribed to Jays Central with notifications turned on because we'll be covering every development as this situation unfolds. When news breaks about Valdez's decision, you'll get our complete analysis and reaction breaking down what it means for the Blue Jays. Let's game out a few scenarios for how this could play out. Scenario 1. This is purely a leverage play, and Toronto has no real intention of signing Valdez. The rumors serve their purpose by creating the perception of interest, which might push other teams to increase their offers. Valdez signs elsewhere within the next few days, and the Blue Jays proceed with their rotation as currently constructed. Scenario 2. Toronto actually has legitimate interest, but only under very specific conditions. Maybe they're willing to sign Valdez if he'll accept a shorter-term deal at a reduced rate. Perhaps there are performance incentives or opt-outs being discussed that would make the financial commitment more palatable. The two sides continue negotiating, but ultimately can't bridge the gap between asking price and offer. Scenario 3. Something dramatic is happening behind the scenes that we don't know about yet. Maybe Toronto is working on trades that would create rotation space. Perhaps they're more concerned about injury risk with their current starters than public reports have indicated. Management decides to stack their rotation with as much quality depth as possible, financial consequences be damned, because they believe this roster can compete for a championship. Drop a comment right now telling me which scenario you think is most likely. Is this just leverage, serious negotiation, or something we haven't anticipated? Your theories and insights make these videos better. The baseball operations philosophy behind roster construction provides some context for evaluating Toronto's decision-making. Modern front offices increasingly value pitching depth because injuries and performance fluctuations are so difficult to predict. Having 6 or 7 viable starting pitchers gives you tremendous flexibility throughout a long season. If Toronto believes they can afford both Cease and Valdez, maybe they're prioritizing that depth even if it creates short-term redundancy. Before we finish, smash that like button one more time if you've enjoyed this breakdown. Getting these videos to perform well in the algorithm helps us grow the Jays Central community and bring you more consistent Blue Jays coverage. There's also the possibility that Toronto explored Valdez as an alternative to Cease before ultimately choosing between them. The winter meetings conversations might have been preliminary discussions before management decided which pitcher they preferred to target aggressively. Once they committed to Cease, the Valdez interest naturally faded. These late rumors could simply be agents trying to revive conversations that had already concluded weeks ago. The remaining free agent market beyond Valdez includes several veteran starters who could provide value to contending teams. Those pitchers are watching Valdez's situation closely because his signing will likely influence their own negotiations. If Valdez gets a strong deal, it sets a certain market level. If he's forced to accept less than expected, it potentially deflates prices across the board for remaining available starters. For Blue Jays fans, the bigger question is whether this roster as currently constructed can compete for a championship. Management clearly believes Cease was the piece they needed to push them over the top. If they're now reconsidering and thinking another major rotation addition is necessary, that raises questions about their earlier evaluation. Was signing Cease alone insufficient? Did something change in their assessment of the competition? Are they reacting to moves made by division rivals? Comment below with your honest evaluation of Toronto's championship chances with and without Valdez. Do they need him to compete, or is the current roster good enough? The financial reality for Toronto involves balancing short-term competitiveness against long-term flexibility. Every dollar committed to player salaries in the current season potentially limits future roster-building options. But if you believe your window to compete is open right now, sometimes you have to prioritize the present even if it complicates future planning. It's the fundamental tension every baseball operations department faces. As we wrap up this coverage, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Jays Central will continue following this story and bringing you updates as soon as information becomes available. Your support through likes, comments, and subscriptions allows us to keep delivering in-depth Blue Jays content. The next week will be crucial for determining Valdez's future and whether Toronto plays any role in his ultimate destination. Spring training begins soon, which should force resolution to his free agency one way or another. Teams will need to finalize their rosters. Valdez will need to choose where he wants to pitch. All the speculation and rumors will give way to actual decisions. Thank you for watching this breakdown here on Jays Central. Drop one final comment telling me whether you're excited or nervous about Toronto's offseason moves heading into the season. Are you confident in this roster's ability to compete, or do you think they need to make another splash? I'll see you in the next video with more Blue Jays coverage.